February 18, 1943. Kummersdorf Proving Ground, 30 kilometers south of Berlin. Morning frost clung to the steel hull of a captured Soviet 34 as Hauptmann Werner Hoffmann adjusted his field glasses. Before him, two weapons teams prepared their equipment. On the left, Unteroffizier Klaus Schmidt hefted a Panzerfaust 30, Germany's newest infantry anti-tank weapon. On the right, Gefreiter Anton Müller shouldered something that looked distinctly foreign, a 60mm tube with crude wire sights that German intelligence had designated Raketenpanzerbüchse 788, parentheses, A close parentheses. The Americans called it a bazooka. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Hoffmann had ordered this comparison test after reading alarming field reports from Tunisia. German tank crews were encountering a new American weapon that infantry could fire from the shoulder. The reports described rockets striking panzers from distances their own infantry weapons could not match. Today's test would determine if those reports were exaggerated combat stress or genuine tactical threat. Schmidt fired first. The Panzerfaust's propellant charge ignited with a sharp crack and cloud of smoke. The oversized warhead wobbled through the air, struck the 34's hull at 28 meters, and detonated. Impressive penetration. Hoffmann made notes. Then Muller's turn. The captured bazooka produced a different sound, a whoosh rather than a crack. The rocket streaked across the test range with visible stability. It struck the same tank at 91 meters. Clean hit. Hoffmann lowered his field glasses slowly. The American weapon had engaged a target at more than 3 times the distance of Germany's Panzerfaust. That single data point represented a fundamental problem. German infantry. Anti-tank doctrine assumed combat at ranges where hand grenades were still viable. The Americans had changed the equation. They had given every rifleman the ability to kill tanks from positions German doctrine considered safe. Within 3 weeks, this test would catalyze Germany's rushed development of the Panzer Shrek, an 88mm copy of the bazooka. But the comparison revealed something more troubling than a mere technology gap. It exposed how American industrial pragmatism had created a weapon system Germany's perfectionist engineering culture had failed to anticipate. The mathematics of this moment would haunt German armor commanders for the remaining 27 months of war in Europe. The origins of this disparity traced to different military philosophies, encountering the same problem from opposite directions. When German engineers designed infantry anti-tank weapons in 1942, they prioritized warhead size and penetration over engagement range. The Panzerfaust 30 carried a 100mm warhead with 400 grams of explosive. Against armor, it was devastatingly effective. But its 30-meter effective range meant German soldiers had to close to distances where tank machine guns and supporting infantry could kill them easily. The weapon's design reflected Germany's engineering obsession with technical perfection. Dr. Heinrich Langweiler's team at Hugo Schneider AG had created a shaped charge warhead that could penetrate 140 millimeters of armor. The problem was delivering that warhead to the target. The Panzerfaust used a simple recoilless principle. A steel tube contained 54 grams of black powder propellant. When fired, the explosion drove the warhead forward while venting gases rearward to eliminate recoil. The system worked. It just did not work at useful distances. By contrast, American development of the bazooka had prioritized practical battlefield utility over theoretical perfection. In May 1942, at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, Captain Edward Ohl had improvised a launcher from a discarded steel tube and a bent coat hanger for sights. The weapon's M6 rocket traveled at 80 meters per second with an effective range of 137 meters. American soldiers could engage tanks from positions German doctrine considered beyond infantry anti-tank range. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The captured bazookas tested at Kummersdorf came from 2 sources. German forces had seized several M1 launchers during Operation Torch, the November 1942 Allied invasion of North Africa. General Dwight Eisenhower would later discover that American troops had received no training on the weapons before the invasion. The bazookas were brand new, rushed into combat before doctrine existed for their Reitdienst employment. German intelligence officers found captured Americans who could not explain how to operate the weapon properly. Yet, even improperly employed, the bazooka had demonstrated capabilities German anti-tank weapons lacked. Additional bazookas had been captured on the Eastern Front. The Soviet Union received thousands of M1 launchers through Lend-Lease starting in late 1942. Soviet forces, desperate for effective anti-tank weapons after catastrophic losses in 1941, distributed the bazookas widely. When German troops overran Soviet positions in early 1943, they captured numerous examples along with ammunition. These trophies provided German engineers with intact specimens for detailed examination. What the examination revealed troubled the Waffenamt, Germany's military procurement agency. The American weapon was almost insultingly simple: a steel tube open at both ends, a basic electrical firing system powered by 2 D-cell batteries, iron sights graduated for 100, 200, and 300 yards, a wooden shoulder stock. Total manufacturing complexity was less than a single SAT G44 assault rifle, yet this simple tube gave American infantry anti-tank capability German troops could not match. The bazooka's rocket used shaped charge technology identical in principle to the Panzerfausts warhead. A cavity lined with copper focused explosive energy into a superheated jet that burned through armor like a cutting torch. The M6 rocket carried 8 ounces of pentalite explosive, capable of penetrating 4 inches of steel. Less penetration than the Panzerfausts warhead, true. But the M6 could strike targets at 137 meters. German tankers facing bazookas had to fear infantry positions they previously considered harmless. More concerning was the weapon's sustainability. The Panzerfaust was disposable. A soldier carried the entire weapon system as a single unit, fired once, then discarded the tube. Resupply meant carrying additional complete Panzerfausts, each weighing 3.2 kilograms. The bazooka's tube was reusable. A soldier carried the launcher once, then carried only rockets for subsequent engagements. The M6 rocket weighed 1.53 kilograms. A bazooka team could sustain fire at a rate impossible with Panzerfausts. German tactical doctrine compounded these disadvantages. The Panzerfaust's 30-meter range forced German infantry into close-quarters engagement with enemy armor. This doctrine made sense in street fighting or defensive positions with prepared ambush sites. It made no sense in fluid combat across open terrain. American infantry with bazookas could engage German tanks from positions offering cover and concealment. German infantry with Panzerfausts had to expose themselves to tank fire while closing to killing range. The tests at Kummersdorf demonstrated this disparity with brutal clarity. When Wehrmacht evaluation, teams fired captured bazookas at stationary targets, they achieved consistent hits at ranges exceeding 90 meters. The weapon's iron sights proved crude, but functional. The rocket's fin stabilization provided adequate accuracy for anti-tank work. Most importantly, the electrical firing system proved reliable across multiple shots. The battery-powered ignition worked in cold weather that caused problems with the Panzerfaust's percussion cap. Additional testing revealed the bazooka's backblast characteristics. Unlike the Panzerfaust, which vented propellant gases in all directions around the operator, the bazooka directed exhaust cleanly out the rear of the tube. This meant the weapon could be fired from covered positions without blinding the operator with smoke. German testers noted that bazooka crews could fire, displace to new positions, and fire again, while Panzerfaust crews were still clearing smoke from their first shot. The penetration tests produced mixed results that, nonetheless, alarmed German evaluators. Against captured Soviet 34 tanks, the M6 rocket penetrated hull side armor consistently at angles up to 60 degrees from perpendicular. Against the thicker armor of German panzers, the smaller 60mm warhead performed less impressively. An M6 rocket striking a Panzer IV at 60 degrees deflection often failed to penetrate the hull, but even non-penetrating hits damaged vision devices, tracks, and external equipment. What truly concerned Hoffmann and his evaluation team was the psychological effect. German tank commanders trained to fear Soviet anti-tank guns and the Red Army's 76mm divisional guns. Those threats required specific tactical responses: position tanks at maximum engagement range, use terrain to mask hull-down positions, coordinate with infantry to suppress gun crews. But the bazooka created an omnipresent threat. Every American rifleman might be carrying a tube that could cripple or destroy a tank. German armor could no longer treat infantry as secondary threats to be suppressed with machine gun fire. The Americans had democratized anti-tank warfare. In 1940, during the French campaign, German armor faced anti-tank guns crewed by trained specialists positioned at known locations. By 1943, in Tunisia and Sicily, German armor faced bazookas carried by ordinary infantry positioned anywhere within 100 to 37 meters. The weapon had transformed every foxhole, every building, every patch of cover into a potential tank ambush site. Hoffmann's report to the Waffenamt emphasized this tactical revolution. The bazooka's technical specifications mattered less than its operational implications. American infantry companies in Sicily carried 12 bazookas per company, plus additional launchers at battalion level. This meant every American infantry advance was supported by numerous portable anti-tank weapons with effective ranges exceeding German counterparts. German panzer commanders could no longer rely on standoff distance to protect against infantry attack. The report triggered immediate action. In March 1943, barely 1 month after the Kummersdorf tests, the Waffenamt authorized development of the Raketenpanzerbuchse 43, later renamed Panzer Shrek. The German copy would use an 88mm warhead for improved penetration, matching the caliber of existing German anti-tank rockets developed for the Raketenwerfer 43, a crew-served launcher mounted on a wheeled carriage. The decision to use existing ammunition simplified development but imposed new constraints. The 88mm rocket required a longer launch tube than the American 60mm design. This made the Panzer Shrek heavier and more awkward to handle. Worse, German engineers discovered that the larger rocket motor did not burn completely within the tube length. The rocket continued burning for rocket motor, approximately 2 meters after launch, creating intense heat and smoke that engulfed the operator. Early Panzer Shrek crews suffered burns severe enough to require medical treatment. The weapon needed protective equipment, gas masks without filters, heavy gloves, and fire-resistant ponchos before soldiers could operate it safely. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. These problems illustrated the fundamental difference between American and German approaches to weapons development. American engineers had designed the bazooka for practical battlefield employment. The weapon worked adequately with minimal training and no special equipment. German engineers had reverse-engineered the bazooka for maximum theoretical performance. The Panzer Shrek's 88mm warhead could penetrate over 200mm of armor, far exceeding the bazooka's capability. But this performance came at cost of weight, complexity, and operator safety. Production numbers told the story even more starkly. By the end of 1943, American factories had manufactured over 150,000 bazookas. German industry produced approximately 25,000 Panzer Shreks in the same period. The disparity reflected not just industrial capacity, but design philosophy. The bazooka's simplicity enabled distributed manufacturing. Small contractors with no military experience could produce components that assembled into functional weapons. The Panzer Shrek's complexity required specialized manufacturing capability that Germany's overstretched industrial base struggled to provide. American soldiers received their bazookas with minimal training. A soldier could learn basic operation in less than 2 hours, load rocket from rear, connect firing wire, aim using iron sights, pull trigger. The weapon's safety mechanisms prevented most operator errors. Soldiers learned through practice, firing training rounds at moving targets. By mid-1943, standard doctrine called for paired bazooka teams. One soldier targeting tracks for immobilization, another seeking kill shots against weak points. The simplicity enabled rapid skill development. German soldiers received Panzer Shreks with extensive training requirements, proper use of protective equipment, understanding backblast danger zones, calculating lead angles for moving targets, recognizing when smoke would reveal position. The weapon's complexity meant fewer soldiers could employ it effectively. German doctrine concentrated Panzer Shreks in specialist anti-tank squads rather than distributing them throughout rifle companies. This concentration created capability gaps. American infantry companies had multiple Bazooka teams per platoon. German infantry companies had 1 or 2 Panzer Shrek teams per company, often held at battalion level. The irony was, not lost on Hoffmann as he compiled his final assessment, Germany had pioneered shaped charge technology. German scientists understood the Monroe effect as well as Americans. German industry could manufacture precision equipment American factories could not match. Yet American pragmatism had created a more effective infantry anti-tank weapon through ruthless simplification. The bazooka worked not because it was sophisticated, but because it was adequate and available in massive numbers. By July 1943, when American forces invaded Sicily, the implications of Kummersdorf's test results were becoming clear. German armor in Sicily faced American infantry equipped with hundreds of bazookas. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division, attacking American positions near Gela, encountered rocket fire from positions German doctrine considered beyond infantry anti-tank range. Multiple German tanks were disabled before closing to effective Panzerfaust range. American soldiers discovered they could fire from windows, doorways, and rubble piles, then displace before German infantry could respond. The combat reports from Sicily validated every concern Hoffmann had documented. German tank commanders reported constant fear of unseen bazookas. Every advance through urban terrain required infantry screens to clear buildings. Every hull-down position needed infantry security to prevent close approach. Operations that should have taken hours required days because armor could not maneuver independently. The bazooka had restored infantry supremacy over armor in close terrain. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commanding German forces in Italy, acknowledged the crisis in December 1943. His report to Oberkommando der Wehrmacht described American rocket launchers as imposing unacceptable losses on German armor. Kesselring recommended fundamental reconsideration of combined arms doctrine. Tanks could no longer operate without massive infantry support. Urban combat was approaching impossibility. The weapon Americans dismissed as simple tube had transformed tactical reality. German responses evolved through trial and error. Tank crews began welding spare track links and sheet metal to hulls as improvised armor, called Schürzen. These additions were designed to detonate shaped charges prematurely, before the jet could reach primary armor. Testing showed mixed effectiveness. Schürzen sometimes worked if spacing was adequate, but the added weight strained already overtaxed engines and transmissions. Panthers and Tigers that should have been mechanically reliable became maintenance nightmares because improvised armor exceeded design specifications. More significantly, German tactical doctrine fundamentally changed. The aggressive armored sweeps that characterized blitzkrieg became suicidal. Tanks required constant infantry screens, reducing advance rates to walking pace. Night operations, once a German specialty, became impossibly dangerous because bazooka teams could approach unseen and fire from point-blank range. German mechanized warfare's essence, speed, and independent maneuver was negated by a weapon any American soldier could carry. The statistical transformation was measurable. In France, during May and June 1940, German armor achieved kill ratios approaching 10-1 against French and British tanks. German panzers destroyed Allied armor with impunity while suffering minimal losses. By late 1943 in Italy, German tanks facing bazooka-equipped Americans approached 1-1 loss ratios. The Panzerwaffe's primary advantage had evaporated, not against better tanks, but against improved infantry weapons. The bazooka struck at Nazi ideology's core. The regime promoted technological sophistication as evidence of Aryan superiority. Complex Tigers and Panthers supposedly demonstrated German genius. But American pragmatism, mass-producing simple effective weapons, proved superior to German. perfectionism. One statistic captured this disparity perfectly. By December 1943, American factories had produced over 200,000 bazookas. German industry had manufactured approximately 30,000 Panzer Shreks. The 5-to-1 production advantage meant American infantry possessed anti-tank capability. German infantry could not match. Training programs ensured this advantage translated to battlefield effectiveness. Unlike German anti-tank weapons requiring extensive instruction, soldiers learned basic bazooka operation in hours. The weapon's simplicity meant cooks, clerks, and supply personnel could become tank killers with minimal practice. This universality transformed battlefield dynamics. Every American soldier was potentially capable of destroying a panzer. German tankers never knew which infantryman might produce a bazooka from a foxhole or doorway. The weapon's versatility expanded its tactical impact. Soldiers discovered bazookas cleared buildings and bunkers as effectively as they destroyed tanks. White phosphorus rockets, while not armor-piercing, could blind crews and force tank abandonment. High-explosive rockets eliminated machine gun nests and fortified positions. Units competed to acquire extra launchers beyond authorized allocations. The weapon symbolized American adaptability, a tool that could solve almost any tactical problem an infantry platoon encountered. Combat experience refined employment doctrine rapidly. Bazooka teams learned paired operations. One gunner targeted tracks for immobilization, forcing the tank to stop. The second gunner then sought vulnerable points, exhaust grills, vision devices, turret rings, where armor plates joined. Teams used terrain effectively, positioning in defilade and waiting until tanks passed before firing into vulnerable rear armor. In mountainous Italian terrain, bazooka teams operated as snipers, sometimes waiting days for perfect shots against moving targets. The psychological impact proved as important as physical destruction. German tank commanders who felt invincible in Poland described constant fear in Italy. Knowledge that any foxhole might contain a bazooka created perpetual anxiety. Tankers trained as predators became prey. The distinctive whoosh of a bazooka rocket launch became the sound German crews feared most. That sound meant a shaped charge warhead was already in flight, traveling at 80 meters per second toward their vehicle. German tactical responses to this threat revealed growing desperation. Standard doctrine by mid-1944 called for tanks to maintain at least 115 meters separation when advancing. This spacing ensured that if one tank encountered bazooka fire, others would not cluster in the kill zone. Anti-tank teams were instructed to position in staggered trenches, ensuring attacking armor would face fire from multiple directions. But these defensive tactics admitted what German armor commanders refused to state publicly. The Panzer, Europe's conqueror through revolutionary armored warfare, now feared American infantry more than enemy tanks. Field reports from Normandy in June 1944 demonstrated this transformation. SS Panzer divisions that had terrorized Soviet forces on the Eastern Front approached Norman hedgerows with extreme caution. Every advance required infantry to clear bocage while armor waited. German tank crews knew Americans with bazookas were positioned in covered fighting positions throughout the dense terrain. One Tiger could theoretically defeat a dozen Shermans in open combat, but one American private with a bazooka could cripple that Tiger from a hedgerow 30 meters away. July 11, 1943. The beach at Gela, Sicily. Sergeant Mike Paulick of the 1st Infantry Division crouched behind a stone wall as Italian R-35 tanks rolled down via Palazzi toward the waterfront. His bazooka team, Loader Private First, class Danny Roth, had been in combat for barely 30 hours. Neither man had fired a bazooka at an actual tank before this moment. Their training had consisted of 3 practice rounds at a moving truck back at Fort Riley, Kansas. The lead tank was 70 meters away. Paulick adjusted his wire sights, aimed at the center of mass, and pulled the trigger. The M6 rocket struck the R-35's thin hull armor and detonated. The shaped charge burned through steel, ignited ammunition, and killed the crew instantly. The tank stopped. The second tank, seeing the lead vehicle destroyed, attempted to reverse. Paulick's team loaded another rocket. Second shot, second tank destroyed. the remaining Italian armour withdrew from Gela. This engagement, repeated dozens of times across the Gela beachhead on July 10th and 11th, validated everything the Kummersdorf tests had predicted. American infantry with bazookas could engage Italian and German armour from positions offering cover. The range advantage meant American soldiers controlled the engagement distance. If a tank approached within bazooka range, it was already in the kill zone. If it remained beyond bazooka range, it could not effectively engage infantry with machine guns. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division's attack on Gela demonstrated these tactical realities against German armour. When Panzer IV tanks and supporting infantry advanced toward American positions, they encountered bazooka fire at ranges their own Panzerfausts could not match. Multiple German tanks were immobilized by track hits, then destroyed by follow-up rockets targeting turrets and hulls. After-action reports from Hermann Göring, division commanders described surprise at American infantry anti-tank capability. German intelligence had not warned them that every American rifle company carried multiple bazookas with trained crews. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The most dramatic demonstration occurred at Biazzo Ridge, southeast of Gela, where elements of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment faced Tiger tanks from Schwer Panzerabteilung 504. Tigers were 60-ton mobile fortresses with 100mm frontal armour. The M6 bazooka rocket could not reliably penetrate Tiger frontal armour, even at optimal angles. Yet, American paratroopers engaged the Tigers with bazookas anyway, not seeking penetrating kills but mission kills. They targeted tracks, vision devices, and external equipment. One Tiger, immobilized by a track hit from a bazooka, became a stationary target for a 75mm pack howitzer the paratroopers had manhandled into position. The artillery piece engaged the Tiger at point-blank range, striking it repeatedly until the crew abandoned the vehicle. This engagement illustrated doctrine that would become standard. Use bazookas to immobilize heavy armor, then destroy the immobilized vehicle with heavier weapons. The bazooka enabled the tactic by creating opportunities for finishing kills. But the Tiger engagement at Biazzo Ridge revealed another crucial factor. The paratroopers who fought there were scattered remnants of their units, assembled by Colonel James Gavin from soldiers who had landed miles from their intended drop zones. Most had never trained together, yet they employed bazookas effectively in combined arms operations with artillery. The weapon's simplicity enabled this improvised coordination. Any soldier who had fired a bazooka in training could integrate into an ad hoc bazooka team and contribute meaningful anti-tank capability. German after-action reports from Sicily consistently cited American rocket launchers as severely degrading armor effectiveness. Tank commanders reported that they could not operate independently of supporting infantry because unseen bazookas threatened from every position. Urban combat became nearly suicidal. Narrow streets channeled tanks into kill zones, where bazookas could fire from upper-story windows at top armor, the thinnest armor on any tank. Even Tigers possessed only 44mm of roof armor, easily penetrated by M6 rockets at optimal angles. This tactical reality forced German armor into operational paralysis in Sicilian cities. When Hermann Göring Division panzers attempted to push through urban terrain toward Gela, they discovered Americans had positioned bazooka teams in buildings covering every street. The tanks could not advance without infantry clearing buildings, but infantry advancing under bazooka fire suffered catastrophic casualties. The tactical coordination required to overcome this defense consumed time German commanders did not have. Operations that should have taken hours required days. The material disparity between American and German anti-tank weapons became undeniable in Sicily. American infantry companies possessed 12 to 15 bazookas. German infantry companies possessed 2 to 3 Panzerfausts at company level, with additional Panzer Shreks sometimes available at battalion level. When equivalent forces clashed, Americans could bring 5 times the anti-tank firepower to the engagement. This numerical advantage often proved decisive even when German weapons possessed superior technical specifications. The cost accounting of this disparity illustrated why American industrial democracy prevailed over German military aristocracy. One M9 Bazooka cost approximately $18 to manufacture. One Panzer Shrek cost approximately $45. One Panzer IV tank cost 250,000 Reichsmarks, roughly $100,000 at 1943 exchange rates. An $18 tube could destroy a $100,000 tank. That mathematics represented the future of warfare. Simple weapons in massive quantities defeating complex systems produced in limited numbers. German engineers understood this problem, but lacked solutions within their industrial system. The Panzerfausts' disposable design addressed manufacturing simplicity, allowing mass production of single-use weapons. But the 30-meter range remained a fundamental flaw. When Germany developed the Panzerfaust 60 in September 1944, extending effective range to 75 meters, American M9 bazookas still outranged it significantly at 137 meters. The Panzerfaust 100, introduced in November 1944 with 100-meter effective range, finally achieved parity in engagement distance. But by then, American forces had deployed hundreds of thousands of bazookas across Europe. The human dimension of this technological competition appeared in countless soldier accounts. Young Americans who never imagined fighting tanks became hunters. Farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Detroit, students from California, all became tank killers, with minimal training. Military heroism was democratized. German memoirs from the period consistently cite the bazooka as the weapon that transformed their combat experience most profoundly. Not Allied tanks, not artillery, not air power. The infantry rocket launcher. Lieutenant Heinrich Schmidt, a Panther tank commander in the Lehr Panzer Division, described his experience in Normandy in his post-war memoir. "We feared the American pipe more than we feared their Shermans. Sherman tanks we could destroy at 1,000 meters. The rocket pipes appeared from nowhere at 50 meters. We knew every hedgerow, every building, every pile of rubble might conceal a soldier with that pipe. The fear was constant. Not the sharp fear of combat, but the grinding anxiety of knowing death could come from any direction at any moment." This psychological warfare proved as effective as physical destruction. German tank crews entered France expecting to repeat their Eastern Front successes against Soviet armor. Instead, they discovered warfare transformed by ubiquitous infantry anti-tank weapons. The bazooka created a hostile environment where armor could not operate freely. Every advance required elaborate preparation. Every position required infantry security. The rapid armored sweeps that characterized blitzkrieg became impossible when every meter of advance might encounter bazookas. The tactical evolution in response to bazookas consumed German operational effectiveness. Pre-bazooka doctrine called for armor to lead infantry advances, using tanks' mobility and firepower to break through enemy lines. By mid-1944, doctrine required infantry to advance ahead of armor, clearing positions that might conceal anti-tank weapons. This doctrinal reversal negated armor's primary advantage. Tanks became supporting weapons for infantry rather than breakthrough instruments. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel acknowledged this transformation in a July 1944 report to Oberkommando der Wehrmacht. American infantry anti-tank capability has fundamentally altered combat dynamics in Normandy. Our armor cannot maneuver as it did in France 1940 or Russia 1941. Every hedge, every building, every shell crater may conceal rocket launchers that can cripple our panzers. We are fighting under conditions that negate our tactical advantages. Rommel's assessment validated what Hauptmann Hoffmann had concluded at Kummersdorf 18 months earlier. The bazooka had changed warfare at the tactical level, but the weapon's true significance operated at the strategic level. Germany's war economy could not match American production capacity across any category of military equipment. When America devoted that production capacity to weapons that were simple, effective, and easy to employ, the quantitative gap became insurmountable. Production statistics from 1944 demonstrated this reality. American factories produced 476,000 bazookas of all types by war's end. German industry produced approximately 314,000 Panzer Shreks and 8 million Panzerfausts. The Panzerfaust numbers appeared impressive until analysed in context. 8 million disposable weapons required constant resupply. 476,000 reusable bazookas, each capable of firing hundreds of rockets, represented sustained anti-tank capability that German industry could not match. The rocket ammunition disparity compounded this advantage. American factories produced 15 million bazooka rockets by 1945. This meant an average of 31 rockets per launcher, enough for sustained combat operations. German Panzerfaust production of 8 million meant each German infantry division theoretically possessed thousands of single-shot weapons. But battlefield consumption rates rapidly exhausted these stockpiles. Divisions that started operations with abundant Panzerfausts found themselves depleted after days of intense combat. The Italian campaign through 1944 demonstrated how this attrition warfare favoured American forces. At Anzio, Monte Cassino, and the Gothic Line, American infantry employed bazookas not just against tanks, but against fortified positions, bunkers, and any target requiring direct fire support. The weapon's versatility meant soldiers used bazookas for missions beyond anti-tank work. This expanded employment consumed ammunition rapidly, but American logistics could sustain high consumption rates that German logistics could not match. By late 1944, approaching D-Day, the transformation was absolute. German tank crews spoke of survival, not glory. They knew hundreds of thousands of Americans waited across the Channel, many armed with the tube that haunted their nightmares since Sicily. The Panzerwaffe, Europe's conqueror through revolutionary armoured warfare, feared American infantry more than opposing tanks. The bazooka had inverted combat logic. Weak became strong, simple defeated complex. The weapon's influence extended beyond immediate military applications. French resistance fighters who received bazookas through Allied supply drops found them invaluable for ambushing German convoys. The weapon required minimal training, perfect for partisan forces lacking formal instruction facilities. Yugoslav partisans, Soviet forces fighting in Eastern Europe, and Chinese forces in Burma all received bazookas through Allied aid programs. The weapon's simplicity enabled global distribution in ways complex systems could not match. Soviet reactions to the bazooka proved particularly instructive. Red Army forces received thousands of launchers through Lend-Lease, starting in late 1942. Soviet soldiers initially dismissed the weapon as inadequate against German heavy armor, but combat experience changed opinions. Soviet after-action reports from 1943 praised the bazooka's reliability and ease of use. The weapon worked in conditions that defeated more complex Soviet anti-tank rifles. Soviet forces used bazookas extensively at Kursk, Kharkov, and during the advance into Ukraine. The German response to captured Soviet bazookas mirrored their response to captured American examples. Waffenamt engineers examined Lend-Lease bazookas recovered from Soviet forces and reached identical conclusions to those drawn at Kummersdorf. The American weapon was simple, effective, and producible in massive quantities. German industry could not replicate this combination. The Panzer Shrek's technical superiority came at costs in weight, complexity, and production volume that negated its advantages. This pattern repeated across German weapons development during the war's final years. Panthers were superior to Sherman's tank for tank, but America produced 5 Shermans for every Panther Germany built. MG-42 machine guns were superior to American machine guns. But American factories produced small arms in quantities German industry could not approach. The pattern was consistent. German perfectionism produced technically superior individual weapons. American pragmatism produced adequate weapons in overwhelming numbers. The bazooka embodied this philosophical difference perfectly. The weapon was not elegant or sophisticated. It certainly was not perfect, but it worked well enough, cheaply enough, and quickly enough to help win a war. Soldiers who carried bazookas into combat rarely thought about historical significance. They thought about survival, protecting fellow soldiers, and completing missions. The bazooka was simply a tool, but it was a tool that transformed them from victims of mechanized warfare into warriors who could fight back. This transformation, repeated hundreds of thousands of times across every theatre of World War II, was the bazooka's real legacy. Not the technical specifications or production numbers or battlefield kills, the confidence it gave to individual soldiers, the knowledge that they were not helpless, the certainty that they could fight and win against even the most formidable enemy weapons. When American infantry faced German armor, they possessed the means to defend themselves effectively. The psychological impact on German forces proved equally profound but inverted. Tank crews who terrorized Europe learned terror's bidirectional nature. Every advance into contact became an exercise in fear management. Would the next foxhole contain a bazooka? Would the next building conceal a team waiting in ambush? Would the next hedgerow hide soldiers ready to fire at point-blank range? These questions dominated German armor operations from Sicily to Berlin. Heinz Guderian, German armored warfare's intellectual father, admitted in his post-war memoirs that American mass production created situations where enemy infantry units possessed more anti-tank capability than German combined arms forces of 1940. This quantitative superiority fundamentally altered mechanized warfare. The bazooka had not just democratized military power, it had redistributed tactical advantage from armor to infantry in close terrain. The weapon's legacy extended well beyond 1945. Every military that studied World War II recognized infantry needed organic anti-tank capability. The principle that portable weapons could defeat heavy armor became fundamental to post-war doctrine. Modern guided missiles descend directly from the shaped charge rockets pioneered by the bazooka. AT-4, disposable launchers, RPG-7, reusable systems, javelin-guided weapons, all trace their conceptual lineage to Uhl's improvised tube from Aberdeen Proving Ground. When German tankers tested the captured bazooka at Kummersdorf in February 1943, they discovered more than a range disparity. They discovered that American innovation threatened to obsolete German armored doctrine. That discovery prompted development of the Panzer Shrek and improvements to the Panzerfausts. But the response came too late with too little production capacity. By the time Germany fielded weapons that could match the bazooka's range, American factories had produced hundreds of thousands of bazookas already distributed throughout Allied forces. The title question, "Did German tankers admit their Panzerfausts were outranged?" finds its answer not in a single dramatic admission, but in accumulated evidence across 2 years of combat. Field reports from Tunisia, Sicily, Italy, and France consistently cited American rocket launchers as imposing unacceptable losses. German tactical doctrine evolved specifically to counter bazooka threats. The Panzerfaust's range was progressively improved from 30 to 60 to 100 meters in direct response to combat experience against American infantry armed with bazookas. This evolutionary response represented implicit admission that German infantry anti-tank weapons were inadequate against an enemy equipped with superior systems. German engineers and commanders understood the problem clearly. Their reports and memoirs acknowledge that American bazookas changed tactical calculations fundamentally. The admission was technical and operational, rather than public or political. But the conclusion was inescapable. Germany had failed to anticipate how portable infantry rocket launchers would transform armored warfare. The human cost of this failure manifested in thousands of destroyed German tanks, tens of thousands of killed or wounded tank crews, and ultimately in Germany's defeat. The bazooka did not win World War II alone, but it contributed to Allied victory by negating German armor's tactical advantages in close terrain. Urban combat, forest fighting, and hedgerow warfare all favored the defender armed with short-range anti-tank weapons. American forces possessed those weapons in quantities German forces could not match. Looking back, across 8 decades, the bazooka encapsulates American World War II strengths in a single weapon system, practical innovation over theoretical perfection, mass production over artisanal craftsmanship, democratic distribution over elite concentration, effective training over extensive preparation. These principles combined to create battlefield advantage against an enemy that excelled at individual weapon design but failed at systemic integration. German tankers facing bazookas learned harsh truths their training had not prepared them for. Their magnificent Tigers and Panthers, engineering masterpieces representing the pinnacle of German technical achievement, were vulnerable to $18 tubes carried by teenagers. Tactical superiority developed over years of experience was negated by simple rockets fired by soldiers with minimal training. Psychological edge gained from early war victories crumbled before weapons that made every American infantryman dangerous. The bazooka proved that in industrial warfare, the nation arming every soldier with effective weapons would prevail over the nation arming few with perfect ones. This lesson influenced military procurement for generations. Simplicity, reliability, and mass production became priorities. Complex systems had their place, but wars would be won by nations that could arm their soldiers with simple, effective weapons in overwhelming numbers. As World War II ended, the lessons were unmistakable. German tank crews surviving the war carried memories of the weapon that transformed them from predators to prey. The bazooka's rocket sound remained etched in memory as the sound that ended German armored supremacy. The simple American tube defeated the complex German tank, and in that defeat lay the fundamental truth of how industrial democracy triumphed over military aristocracy in history's greatest conflict. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.